Namaste. Welcome to our Satsang. And I have the questions here. If I don't get to answer all the questions, I will afterwards, after our 1 hour. Then I'll go and I will answer them on our website. So then if you can go to there, if I've not answered your question now, and see that. Excuse me, I'm shaking the magic box. Oh no, a commercial first. I'm happy to say to you that this is doing very, very well. And I'm glad, not because of the idea of money, but because it's such a valuable book. In fact, I keep that near me. I always have this copy here in our office, and then in our kind of living room, I have another copy, and I will every so often just reach over, open at random, and read it, because I'm really rather awed at how beautifully, wonderfully that group of people put together this marvelous book. I'm working right now on another one, which was, you could call it a copycat book. Sanatana Dharma was printed in 1902, and in 1920, 18 years later, the Bharat Mahamandal ashram, where Yogananda lived, actually, when he was in Benares, the Bharat Mahamandal ashram put out their own book, which was definitely modeled on the Sanatana Dharma book, but it was much longer, much more detailed, much more technical. And I am just coming toward the end of final editing, and then eventually that will be posted on our website and printed, and I hope that too will be of value, especially for those who want to go even deeper in this, because we have to understand real Dharma is vast, and it can't be encompassed even in a single lifetime. People who like easy, quick things, well, they should go to the Western religions of the world that are so simplistic. And you can learn it in 5 minutes or maybe 15 if you're really earnest. And you just memorize a few little things like a creed or sentences like that. And then, well, you've got it. You don't have to bother with Dharma, because those religions cannot be taken into anyone's life except in the most superficial way, which, of course, when it's a matter of morality, is a good thing. But real Dharma goes into the depths of your entire being, and therefore is incredibly complex. But you've come to this world to attain self-realization, not to reap your karma. That's an intervention in this process and a hindrance usually in this process. But that's what you come for, to realize it. So why wouldn't you dedicate as much time as possible to learning it and then following it? All right. In fact, here is the first question I've drawn out. What should be the real definition of Dharma? Well, it has two aspects. The word, just the word itself. Dharma means qualities, character, essential nature. And then logically from that, there was evolved or projected a second, but not secondary definition, which is the right way to live in all ways, and live also in your mind, in your thought, in your heart, and your feelings, and then in your outer life, to express your true quality as a divine Atma, a Jiva, an eternal being coming into time and space and working to evolve the scope of its consciousness. And that is what Sanatana Dharma really is. It is the process of bringing out your true person. And that's the definition of Dharma. Anything that reveals your eternal self can be called Dharma. And of course, Dharma also includes purification and discipline, which you might liken to the washing of a dirty window or the cleaning off of a smudgy mirror so that you can see what it is you are supposed to see. Does reincarnation always happen forward in time, or can someone be reincarnated into the past? Some interesting fiction stories have been made from the idea of people who went into the past to change things. But no, such a thing is anything is possible. So for me to say such a thing is impossible is ridiculous. Because if you conceive it, it can happen. But I can conceive having 4 heads, but it's not likely I'm ever going to have 4 heads. So that doesn't mean it can definitely happen. When I was only, I think, 8 years old, I heard an interesting radio program of a man who decided to go back into time to the time Lincoln was assassinated, to somehow manage to be at the Ford Theater and be able to prevent the assassination. And so he went back in time, but guess what? He was John Wilkes Booth. So he assassinated Lincoln, and therefore all the trouble was of no avail. But time, of course, is an illusion. So again, that's why I'm not being absolute on no you can, no you can't. If you like science fiction, I can recommend a wonderful book. It's by Clifford Simak, S-I-M-A-K. It's called Time is the Simplest Thing. And it is very, very interesting. All right. Christians acknowledge the baptism of the Holy Spirit. Is this also acknowledged outside of Christianity? Well, what's the Holy Spirit? It's Mahashakti. It is the divine power of all manifestation, whose very essence is the impulse to move us upward. So we're baptized. See, real baptism means immersion. So we're immersed in the Holy Spirit right now, and we're living in the Holy Spirit. And a ritual which claims to impart that is really one for awakening, to help a person awaken into the Holy Spirit, but they're already inside it. So any empowerment ritual in any religion is a kind of baptism in the Holy Spirit. And this is what Diksha especially is usually considered to be, rather than just a simple instruction in a spiritual process, that it is an infusing of power or an opening of consciousness so that a person will be able to grow and evolve more than they would have been without that inner kind of push. Initiation is a very interesting subject. Just about 10 minutes ago, I was thinking of the initiations I'd seen given by Swami Sivananda, which he gave in satsangs. A lot of people witnessing. There's a big thing in India about secrecy. The guru whispers the mantra into the disciple's ear. Uh, why? Because there are people who like secrecy and mystery and act like, I've got something you don't have, or I know something you don't know, you see. It's all pure ego, and it's the most childish of egos. But so there is such a pretense. Well, Sivananda was beyond that foolishness. So a person might say, well, Swamiji, may I have initiation? He'd say, yes, go bring me a japa mala. So they bring him a japa mala. And he would take it and hold it between the three fingers. And he would say, now listen to me. And then he would 3 times recite the mantras. Let's say it's going to be Shiva mantra. So he'd say, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. All right? Now say it with me 3 times. And again, Om Namah Shivaya 3 times, but the 2 of them together. And then he would say, now you by yourself. And the person would recite in tone the mantra 3 times again. And Sivananda would look at them very intently. And then he'd hand them the mala and say, that's it. And it was, but it was the opening of the path to infinity. He, for some interesting reason, initiated me into the Maha Mantra, the so-called Hare Krishna mantra, which really begins with Hare Rama. And it was at a satsang. And he said, stand up. I said, yes. I stood up. He said, you are doing the Maha Mantra Kirtan for an hour a day? Because you see, in Sivananda Ashram by that time, it had been going on continuously for decades. And there would always be at least one person in the satsang hall, and they would be reciting aloud, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, or singing it. And another one of the ashramites used to go for 2 hours. And we did it for 2 hours rather than just me one, then he one, and we would sing it. And there were people who'd come in and sit there and sing it along with us. So anyway, he says to me, you were doing the Maha Mantra daily? Yes, I said. He said, it's very purifying, isn't it? I said, yes, it most certainly is. He said, sing it for me 3 times. So I did, and he looked at me, more toward the heart region, and the Holy Spirit, Shakti power, came right out from him into me. And you understand, he was omniscient. He knew everything. And he knew that during my later travels in India and so on, there would be times where I would be utterly exhausted, maybe I hadn't had hardly anything to eat, and I'd be feeling completely, shall we say, strung out, is our American thing, or frazzled. And I found that I could just sit and sing it softly but loud for a few times, and all the fatigue would be gone, and all the problems would be gone. And so that was a very practical application I had of that. All right. I believe that the only way to really know that I'm not the body is to have some kind of out-of-body experience. Is that true? It doesn't seem enough to intellectually understand, I'm not this body, I'm not this mind. Well, I've known a lot of people who claim to have had out-of-body experience, and I've never known one of them who really showed that they knew they were not the body. In fact, they usually felt, thank heaven I came back into the body, and so I'm real now. Quite truly. In fact, I knew a woman who as a child would go out of her body when she went to sleep, but she hated it because she really went and wandered on various planes, and you can encounter very unpleasant things. Therefore, when she met an Indian teacher that she wanted to instruct her, the first thing she said was, "Can you get me off the astral?" And he said, "Yeah, sure." And he gave her some instruction, and she was never bothered from then on. So I've never found that really helps. You can experience your true self while you're in the body, and considering the fact that your karma has brought you in here, why leave it until the time of death arrives? So in real meditation, genuine meditation, applied and which ripens through diligent practice, you'll come to experience that. I absolutely guarantee you. In fact, you will find dimensions of yourself that you're quite amazed you have. All right. This has to do, this question, with what I've written before and talked about before. I wrote a book on meditation. And then later, when I had the good fortune to discover Soham sadhana, practiced it, and found it beyond anything I'd ever done before. And by the way, I spent 50 years doing this practice and that practice, and oh, this guru knows, and oh, that guru knows. And it was always the same thing. Like, I attained certain things. I got certain intuitive abilities. I knew how to take mantras and cure myself of things, or I knew how to use it to discover the nature of things, and so on. But so what? I didn't come to the world for that. And then when I practiced Soham, after 5 minutes I knew, this is it. And every day I am awed. I mean this, I'm not selling you. I don't get any commission if you do Soham yoga. I don't lose any money if you don't. So I have no interest in the money. I've not been given a franchise. And therefore, but I tell you, I am awed. I don't mean I'm just impressed. I am awed every time I sit for meditation. Because, you know, it's like my grandmother, who was actually a spiritually awakened person because she had found someone in her early life that awakened her. She used to say, I wasn't a human being till he got a hold of me. But of course, this was still within the very limited scope of fundamentalist Protestantism, but it wasn't nothing. And it wasn't without value. And she was doing what she knew, and then she came to a certain point. And she said, I've been looking for this all my life. And we've all been looking for Soham, all of our incarnations, but we didn't know it. Which is why Nath, the very first yogi in this kalpa, in this cycle of creation, wrote just those 3 interesting sentences. The breath comes in with the sound of so and goes out with the sound of hum. Vidya, knowledge, such as this, equal to this, has never existed and will never exist in the future. In other words, this is a supreme fact of life. And then the third one, which is important, japa, such as this, has never existed before. And its equal will never exist in the future because you do the japa of it. There's some people who think if you do right, why, you'll sit there and then you'll hear the subtle sound of so and hum vibrating in your subtle bodies. And it can happen. I've experienced it. But that's passive. That's just a discovery of something. then what am I going to do with the discovery? I'm going to use it and consciously apply it, and therefore attune myself and enter in to that eternal process and that eternal condition called Soham Bhava, which has always been going on and always been with me. And that's it. And it's incredibly simple. But it works. Is all meditation of little value? It is of great value. But it falls short, as do all other practices, which doesn't mean they're wrong. It doesn't mean they're bad. But they don't. I'm speaking by the voice of experience. I mean, after all, can't you tell by looking at me how enlightened I am? Oh my. Okay. Some saints, such as Yogananda, seem to have a keen sense of humor, sometimes for teaching purposes. If you have any stories, thanks. Well, first of all, we have a posting on our website called Mischievous Yogananda, which is about some of Yogananda's very funny ways. Actually, it's my conversation with some people from the Ananda village in California, and telling about these things. What comes to mind? Well, first of all, is just the fact he had such a sense of humor. When he, toward the end of his life, when he went out to 29 Palms and finished the dictation of his commentary both on the Gospels and on the Bhagavad Gita, and was in this superconscious state, of course he always was in the higher reaches of him, but he was showing it all because he was having to be in tune with it. And there were a few people there who sat around him, and one of them told me, she said, we were in profound awe because we knew God is here. God is present. And he would reveal these incredible things about the Gospels and about the Gita. No one had ever thought of. But of course, he was getting it from God, who originally inspired the Gospels and the Gita. So she said it was truly awesome. But then one time, of all things, a civic organization, the Chamber of Commerce, in either 29 Palms or another of the small towns around there, asked him to come and speak. Heaven only knows why, because they weren't yogis. But they asked him to come and speak. Maybe they'd heard from someone he was a good speaker. So anyway, he went there. Well, what is he going to say? What is he going to say? Brahmachuni Atmananda, who was an Austrian who came to India just missing the rolling in of the Nazis into Vienna, who then became a devotee of Anandamayi Ma. And she knew about 5 or 6 languages, and she would translate for various people who came from outside India and, of course, could speak no Indian language. So one time, an entire group of people from France showed up in New Delhi, and it came to the New Delhi ashram. And Ma was saying all these incredibly funny things. And she was telling jokes, and she was just telling funny incidents. And they were laughing and laughing, and then Ma looked at Atmananda and said, well, at least I can make them laugh. That said a little bit something about them, but anyway. So, what is Yogananda going to say to these people? You know, they end the cycle of rebirth and attain self-realization. Well, it's hardly going to be. So he told his story, which was a very, very funny story, an adventure story of many, many aspects of the difficulty he had during the Second World War in getting a new washing machine. All right. And the people laughed and laughed and laughed. And people afterwards, several said, I've never laughed so hard in my life. Well, you see, by the power of his voice, by the power of his vibration, he was able to impart this, which would be seeds for future awakening, perhaps in that present life or in another life. But you couldn't come into his presence and leave it not eternally changed, profoundly changed, even if it didn't show in your life then. You see. Sri Ramakrishna used to go into samadhi a lot. He sometimes spent days in samadhi. And there were people who came under his spiritual influence and they followed what he taught them. And by his just spiritual power, which he imparted to them, they would have these superconscious experiences. So there was a priest of the Kali temple there in Dakshineshwar. And like most of the priests, I'm sorry to say, was just doing it for the money. And not out of devotion to God at all. But he saw people were having these states, bhavas they're called. So he came to him one time, when Sri Ramakrishna was alone, and said, look, you're touching people, and they're going into these states. Touch me. I want to have some of that too. There are always people like that. How much it's what they want for themselves, or they just can't stand the fact that someone else got something they don't have. So, till you do it, Sri Ramakrishna says, no, don't you see, it's not for you. No. So Sri Ramakrishna touched him. He fell on the ground and began rolling around and screaming in agony, saying, I'm burning, I'm burning, I'm burning. Because you see, that divine power does just that. It burns out the seeds of karma. It burns out and purifies the negative samskaras. And if you're in tune with that, and you're really working for that, in other words, if you're a sadhaka, well, then it's glory. But if you're not, it's hell, you see? The Eastern Christians say a very interesting thing. They say it isn't true that, well, one day there'll be a judgment and then bad people all get thrown into hell. They said no. The day will come, by the way, I don't believe this particularly, but it has basis of truth to it. They said, the day will come when God will say no more, and he'll reveal himself totally. And his divine light presence will pervade the universe, all the worlds. And the people who are negative will experience it as fire and agony. And it will be the fires of hell for them. And for those who are positive and pure, it will be the fires of spiritual life, of purification, of awakening, and divine Ananda. It just depends on what you're ready for at this time, same time. So anyway, he's rolling and screaming. And Sri Ramakrishna actually put his foot on him, and the man stopped and was not suffering anymore. And Sri Ramakrishna just smiled and quietly said, perhaps in a future life. Yes. So, let's make sure that that future life is in this life for us. This is just a mention about someone, if I had seen their writings on a certain subject, and if I knew about it, and The answer is no, but now I know, since you sent this question, to look this author's works up. Perhaps I'll learn something. I've been told that Sri Kaleshwar has copied a Jesus yantra and a Jesus mantra from palm leaves written by Jesus. Do you know anything about these? No, not a dot. I've never heard of it before. And besides, who wants a Jesus mantra or a Jesus yantra? You're not Jesus. And the consciousness of Jesus is not your consciousness. Meditate and experience your own true self, and then you'll have something. But in my opinion, this is complete. I don't even believe it. But even if it's true, it doesn't matter. I mean, after all, we have the teachings of Krishna. Do people get enlightenment by reading the Gita? No. We have the Upanishads, great rishis, the greatest of rishis, the Maharishis. It's their teachings. We read it. Does it give us enlightenment? No. We have mantras of deities, but see, we're not the deities. So, who am I? And it's the I. And the I says Soham. And that's in the Upanishads. That in the beginning there was just the Paramhansa, the absolute being. And it first said, it's the first thing. Soham asmi. I am Soham. And Tatvamasi, thou art that. Does Jesus the Christ have a role or a plan in the evolution of mankind? If he does, what would that role or plan be, and how can humanity support the plan? Well, Jesus is one among many. Great beings, great liberated beings. An avatar is someone who started out as an atom of hydrogen, just like you and I did, and evolved and evolved and evolved and got beyond the earth evolution and went into the higher astral worlds and evolved beyond them and went into the causal worlds and evolved beyond them and then got into the absolute, which was their original home anyway. And then they were God. They weren't infinite God. They were finite God, because only God's infinite. The self is divine, but it isn't infinite. But he, the self of the self, is. Therefore, we can experience infinity by that, by being in that consciously. So then, Jesus, Rama, Krishna, these great beings, and there is no doubt tens of hundreds of thousands, we don't know their names. I remember an anthropologist telling about a place in South America, forgive me, I don't remember the country at all, that he said that they had a tradition that a great shaft of light had once come down. This was centuries before our time. And out of this great shaft of light, this man and several other people just stepped out of it. And he became like the spiritual teacher and awakener of that civilization. And was with them for many years and taught them many things. And when he was leaving his body, he said, I'm going to leave. You will see me when I depart. But now the body's going to die. And I want you to make a plaza and have 4 pyramids, one at each corner of the plaza. And in one pyramid, I want you to put my hands. In another pyramid, I want you to put my feet. In another pyramid, I want you to put my heart. And then I want you to put the rest of my body in the fourth pyramid. And whoever comes here and goes around touching each pyramid in turn, meaning just once, first, second, third, fourth, they'll be healed of any diseases. And so they did that. He then immediately left his body, and they made the plaza. And people came from all over South America. And they touched in turn what we call parikrama, you see, circumambulation in Indian tradition. And no one was not cured. And this happened for many years. And then one day, because he said, you'll see me ascend. And one day, when there were a lot of people there, the blazing shaft of light, as when he first appeared, came down on the pyramid where his heart was. And they saw him physically come up, passing through, of course, the stone of the pyramid, and go up and out of sight, ascended, as did Jesus. Well, most people have never heard of him, they don't remember his name. The anthropologist told his name, but I've forgotten, sorry. But this has happened, you see. God has come so many times. One of our ashramites was on the plane going to India, and an Indian man was sitting next to him. And in the conversation, the Indian man said, God was born as my brother. And he said, really? Yeah. He said, yes. He said, from the day he was born, he worked miracles. And he only lived to be a few years old. But people used to flock to our house to see him, to touch him. And he did all these wonders. And then he left the world. Well, we don't understand the story of that. I'd like to tell you, excuse me, I need to look at something. Okay. There was a woman in Vrindavan, the birthplace of Lord Krishna, where he grew up, because he was born in Mathura. But he was taken right after birth to Vrindavan. So, the sacred river, the Jumna, flows through there. And so people go every day and they bathe in the Jumna, which has a very sacred and powerful vibration. So there was a woman who was pregnant, pretty well advanced in pregnancy. And she went with a few other of her friends together, as they usually did. And so they went into the Jumna and they immersed and so on. And they came back out and somebody said, look at you. And they looked and she wasn't pregnant anymore. She'd been very, very large, the swelling in the womb. And it was like normal. She thought, God, I've had a miscarriage. And actually she went back in the water and kept trying to see, the poor embryo there. You couldn't find it. So they went back, she went. And when she went in her house, she opened the door, stepped in, and a newborn baby with water all around him, as if he'd been brought out of water, was laying there. And she knew, well, whether this is my baby, who then is brought here from the Jumna, which it would seem, or whether it's God, I don't know. But, well, he's here in my house. And so she brought him up as her child. He was called Jagat Bandhu, which means the brother of the world. Isn't that a beautiful thought? We like the idea of savior of the world and so on, and that's true. But Bandhu, not bandhu, friend of the world. See, friend of the world. We're saying Sri Raghunatha Mama Bandhu. Sri Rama is my friend. So, he never left the house, but he grew up there and was miraculous, and people came to him. He gave spiritual teachings. You understand? He didn't get any education at all, but he spoke words of wisdom, and he gave great spiritual empowerment to people. I expect he healed people too and so on, but that's very minor. As it says in the autobiography of a yogi, the bodies healed by Lahiri Mahashai all had to go into the fires of cremation eventually. But the souls awakened by him, they went on forever. And so, he was there and brought many people into God, and then he just left the body, and that was it. Who was he? Where did he come from? Why did he? We don't know. But be assured, God is always with us. God is always here. It's like a little story I heard about a man who decided to be an intellectual and an atheist. I fail to see why unbelief is a sign of intelligence. But anyway, so he didn't believe in God, and so he had to let it be known what he thought. This tells you where it's from. It's from his ego. So people have got to tell the world about them. So he made a big sign that said, God is nowhere, and put it on his wall. And one day some people came to see him, and there was a first grade child just learning. He learned some reading, could spell out. So he looked at the sign and said, God is now here. And something clicked in the man's head. He thought, that's right, God is here. I'm a fool. He took the sign down. So we need to understand this, that God is here now. He's in me. So the only way I can meet him is in me. Therefore, as the Krishna says to Arjuna, be a yogi. Okay. Sorry, went rather on that. The problem is, I love talking about it, and so there's the difficulty. After experiencing a very quiet happening of total non-separation from all that was around me for a very short period of time, why did it come and go? And I'm not in that constantly when I know in my heart that was a very real experience. Well, you ate, no doubt, this morning. It was a real experience, but you're going to eat later on now at noon, aren't you? So the fact that something's a real experience doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be permanent. After all, it was real that you were born. Oh, in one way, it's all an illusion because it's Maya, but let's lay that aside. So yes, I mean, I was born feeling the presence of God all around me. I mean, I never felt like there was space. Like, here am I, and over there's that wall. No, there was always a field of something. I didn't have a word for it, but I was walking around inside it. And also, I could feel the things that happened to objects around me. Someone could sit at a table a few feet away from me, and they kept tapping their finger. I'd feel it somehow. If they might just rub something, I could feel it. It was so strong that I used to even when I was getting in my teens, if I would walk down the hall and somehow accidentally bang on the wall, I'd say, excuse me. Sounds very nuts, of course. But finally, one time when I was in college, I prayed and said, Dear God, could I experience what other people experience? Not being in this unity of everything around me. I'd like to know what it's like. Well, God answered my prayer. I didn't enjoy it. And for about 20 minutes, I thought, oh, I hope I haven't messed it up. And that God will say, well, you asked for it, you've got it. Fortunately, came back. But there's something beyond that. If it wasn't, I wouldn't be here talking to you. I would have long gone and gone to merge in the infinite. See, it's one of the ways you know I'm not a fake, as like the way these fake gurus, because I didn't come here to earth to uplift you, help you, save you. Every fake, because in fact, let me warn you a little bit. Let me tell you. There's one thing, this is small, but one of the things fakes like to do is you go to say, oh, I looked around and I've been trying to find what's true. And I was there for a while in that group. I followed that teacher and so on and so forth. And then when they come to the end of the recitation, then the great master says, but that is what brought you here. And they go, oh, well, yes, isn't that wonderful? Yeah, lots of luck. So there are people who like to do that. And then they have their story. And I can tell you the story, so when you hear this in the future, know a jackass is braying, okay? All right. They were very sick. It's always sickness. They don't just go to sleep at night and have it happen. They were on the operating table. They were under the anesthesia. And they went up out of their body, high, high, higher. Finally, they came into this world. Mostly, if they're good at it, it was just all light. Oh, they were so happy. Oh, it was so wonderful. Free from all the bondage of earth and so on. And so they just floated there, just enjoying it. Joy, joy, joy. And then either it's a person or an individual or a consciousness they didn't see. Sometimes they see a person, sometimes they feel someone, or a great voice from all around them speaks and says, would you be willing to return to earth to help others? And they agree. And they open their eyes and they're back in the hospital or the this or that. Run for your life. Okay. How to prioritize truth at every moment, especially when situations or people seem difficult. Well, there's two ways. First of all, seeing the truth of something. Part of the truth is there's something for you to learn or it wouldn't be happening to you. That's what karma is all about. It's not reward, it's not punishment, it is reaction. But it's instructive reaction. So first you say, what is there for me to learn from this? Now it can be, as I told you, when someone tells these stories, it means get out of here. They're selling you a bit of goods. At other times not, but you say, there has to be a meaning. Sometimes a person is just really mean to you, and you think, well, why'd they do that? I never did anything to them. Then hopefully you'll remember, wait a minute. No one could do anything to me that I didn't do in a previous life, or maybe in this life, to another person. That's what karma is all about. So, they did that for me to understand. I did that in the past. What? It may help clear up that karma, but it also is a reminder of me, I'm not a little sunbeam for Jesus. I'm not a little ray of light. I'm here in hell. Somebody asked Yogananda, do you believe in hell? He smiled and said, where do you think you are? A world wherein you can have Nazism and the Holocaust, communism and the murder of 50 to 60 million Christians in the Soviet Union, where you can have Saddam Hussein, where you have plagues. World War I killed so many people, but more people right after the war died from the so-called Spanish flu. If a world like that isn't hell, well, you've got a pretty darn weird idea of heaven. So here you are, and the basic truth of everything is, I've got to get through here, and I've got to get out of here alive, but the body can't come out alive. So my soul had better be alive. Also, it is, when do I speak the truth and when do I not speak the truth? When someone comes and says, oh, last night I saw Buddha. He came right down through my the ceiling of my room. And he was so enlightened, oh, so beautiful. Then he went away. Well, they're not out of their mind, but you don't say you're not out of your mind. You just say, well, it's interesting. If you want to be a little bit more, you could say, well, then why don't you ponder on it and see if there was a message for you in it? Oh, God help you if they figure out a message. But anyway, say a little bit of something and then get out of there, you know. There was a popular song, actually, in fact, Tiny Tim used to sing it, but at one point it said, I knew I couldn't take much more, I started heading for the door. So sometimes in life, the way you do is you get out. I have been in situations where I realize I am in the middle of a group of not just not spiritual people. I am in a group of people actively destroying their souls. That vibration is surrounding me. And they naturally expect that I'm going to drink the booze they're going to drink, smoke the dope they're going to drink, drop the pills, whatever it is. I need to get out of here and get out. And it was one of the first things I did on my path to being a yogi. When I finally had the time where I understand there's karma, there's reincarnation, there's evolution of consciousness and so on. And I had read some things on yoga, was trying my best, though I knew very little, to do it. And I got in a situation like that, and I thought, I am out. And I got out. I was several miles from home. When somebody said, oh, let me drive you, I said, no, it's okay. I love to walk, which, by the way, I did. So I walked all the way home, and then I went to my psychology professor, with whom I was really quite friendly, who just had a very fundamentalist Christian view of things. And of all things, he said, well, was anything new? I said, yes, I learned about the evils of caste mixture. And he, of course, had an absolute fit, because we all know that caste is a wrong idea. But anyway, move sometimes. How do you feel about the Nath tradition being used by politicians in India like Nath? Well, I never pay any attention to Nath whatsoever, because he knows nothing. And I mean, when I say nothing, nothing. And I mean, what he has to say, even when it is the truth, because there's no life and reality behind it in the consciousness, it's emptiness. So it kind of isn't the truth. You know, there are some people so twisted to negativity, everything they say is a lie, even if they say, well, we're in the United States. Somehow I know, well, there's got to be something false here. So Fools have done this always. Nehru used to do it. He was a God-hating person. He attached himself to Gandhi as a parasite. And he realized, oh, this old man's going to die, and I'll be the main person around here. And so he persecuted religion, so very obliquely, but he did persecute it. I mean that, literally. He put some people in jail who were dharmic people that he felt threatened the policies he wanted to institute. Remember, the Congress Party has always acted in coalition with the Communist Party. Now that should tell you something. How about the company you keep? It showed they were both godless. I was there under both his regime and his daughter's regime. And let me tell you, God-hating was the business of their politics. But they would go to visit holy people, and especially Anandamayi Ma. You see, Anandamayi Ma one time went to a hospital. I'm trying to check to see if I'm going over the time. Anandamayi Ma one time went to a hospital and visited a devotee who was sick. So then, when the visit was over, when she walked out, instead of going out of the hospital, she went over to a stairway and started up the stairs. So the people with her said, "Well, Mom, what are you doing?" And she said, "I'm going to visit somebody." So they followed her, and she went down this hallway a distance and came to a door that had a huge sign saying, "Positively no admittance." Okay? And Ma opened the door and admitted herself in and went, and a man was lying there unconscious in the bed. And of course, some of the staff of the hospital come running, and Ma said, "I'm just going to go in, just going to stand, well, not say a word, come out." All right, so she went in. She put her hand on the mattress beside him. He'd had a ruptured appendix. He was considered absolutely on the death march. And it happened to be Jawaharlal Nehru, the Ma had ever had any contact with. But anyway, she just touched the mattress a while, then she turned around, went out, closed the door. And in a few hours, he opened his eyes, and he was right away on the way to recovery. So he had to know Ma had abilities. But being what he was, he couldn't learn from Ma. He couldn't really take spiritual ideals. So he realized, well, most of the people in this country are Hindus. And they know I'm an atheist. And they know I never do anything that is good for religion. In fact, I did things bad. So when Anandamayi Ma comes to Delhi, I'll always go out and visit her. And then they'll say, "Well, he goes to see Anandamayi Ma." And he would sometimes bring just huge amount, dozens of Rudraksha malas. You have a big handful like that. And give them to Ma. And Ma would touch them and bless them. Then he'd take them, and then he'd give them out to religious people that he hoped they would be bribes for them to back him, saying, "Oh, well, Nehruji isn't so bad." He was. And then, of course, Indira Gandhi did the same. Of course, she grew up knowing Mother. She felt like Mother was her grandmother in a sense, because her mother was a true Hindu and a devout Hindu whose life was spent in meditation and worship. And of course, she brought her to Ma. So she and her father both used association with Ma for their own, their furthering of their own career. What they forgot was death would take it away. If they'd really been wise, they would have gotten from Mother what death cannot take away. Like a devotee of Ma that had sung, he asked, he was dying and his family was all around. And he asked that a song that was written by Sri Jyotish Chandra Roy, who we call Baiji, that he wrote, that begins Jaya Jaya, Sri Sanatani, the Holy Eternal, Sri Anandamayi Ma, and so it goes on. I've sung it many times, but I don't remember the words anymore, except in the end you say, and at thy holy feet we bow. Pranami, we bow. Prana also means like moving at pranam, means like almost like you're offering your prana, you're offering your salutations. Pranam Sri Charane, at your holy feet. So that's the end of the psalm that just says then, glory to thee, at thy holy feet we offer our prana, we offer our life. And they sang it, and as they sang those words, he left his body. You see? That man was smart. He didn't buy votes with Ma because he didn't need to, because the world of the Supreme was open to him by associating with Ma, listening to Ma, following what Ma said for spiritual life and practice, and therefore everything went fine. So I have 3 more questions. Here, let's see if I can do them right now. If I think I can't, and I can't give a... Okay. Please speak on bija mantra. Bija mantra is a single syllable that is used in certain rituals. The practices of Tantra often involve bija, but they can also be used in just ordinary kind of worship. They're because bija, well, think of them as bombs. They're kind of like sound bombs. Like Om Namah Shivaya is an invocation of the Shiva consciousness. But you say it a lot, and because, after all, we're Mayic people, and it has to soak in. Like we drink a lot of water, and it goes throughout our body and then functions there for our benefit. But a bija is sort of like boom. So when you recite them a few times in a row, it's sort of whoosh, and there it is. Now, of course, if you don't know what to do with the whoosh, well, then you wasted your time. And what the tantrics do with the whoosh is ultimately harmful. But anyway, that's what a bija mantra is. There are gurus that hand these out, and what they do is they create great tension and conflict in the psyche, in the mental shakti, and they really disorient a person on a certain level. I don't mean they walk around like they're half asleep, and they're always miserable. They're tense and they're miserable, even if it's way down deep. And I have seen this. One of the super gurus that operated in America used to give out these kind of bija mantras, and people would come to me and they say, well, what am I doing wrong? And I say, what you're doing wrong is what he taught you. And they'd have lots of problems and kind of mental tangles that really bothered them. And I say, just stop it. And just go out now and go for a walk. And they come back and say 30 minutes and say, all my problems are gone. I can't believe it. And then they say, you mean that mantra did that to me? I said, yes, it did it to you because of that bija. Not that the bija itself was negative, but it overloaded your nervous system. There was a phony guru in Brindaban who really handed these out. And when I was in Delhi, it was amazing. Somebody could walk in a room and I know, oh no, another one. What's kind of interesting, I never thought of before, but that guru and the super guru in America I'm talking about, they had the very same sannyasa name. I don't think that tells anything, but it's kind of interesting, isn't it? So now, you can read the term bija mantra, especially if you read discourses of Anandamayi Ma. Bija means seed, okay? And a seed's a tiny thing, so they say, well, cling, 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 that's Krishna's bija mantra. But when Ma said a bija mantra, she meant the mantra you use for japa, which is like a seed that will germinate and develop and grow into the consciousness of the deity, okay? Sorry. So that's what she meant. She meant you like plant the bija mantra in your consciousness, you warm it up by continual practice, and then it grows as it should. So when she said that, she meant a normal mantra, all right? I'm sorry, I don't quite understand this question. They said practical types for daily sadhana. I'm going to assume you mean practical ways, practices, or routines. And I wrote a book. It's called Soham Yoga, the Yoga of the Self. I would advise you to read that because I could sit here for hours and not come to all the end of it, because that's a big question and it does have a big answer. It's a very good question. All right. Can you comment on the Shroud of Turin and what was responsible for the image? Well, there's all kinds of theories. Who knows? Is it about the wrapping of Jesus? And they say, oh, there's this and that proves this and that proves this and that. Jesus came into the world a light. A cloth that wrapped him up when the body was dead. What value is that? And what value does it even mean if you say, oh, it proves that Jesus really lived? Well, there are people who say tons of people were crucified, so you're going to find the wounds of crucifixion. And the crowning of thorns was normal. It was one of the ways they tortured a person who was condemned to death. You understand? See, when we read about it, because Jesus is so special, we think all of the crowning with thorns, giving him a reed for a scepter, which I also hit him in the head with, putting a robe on him and saying, "Hail, King of the Jews." We think, well, they hated him so much, he was so great, they were treating him specially. They were not. I have seen at the Palace of Pilate, in the excavations, diagrams, about 3 diagrams, that they kind of look like a hopscotch diagram that people used to draw on the sidewalk when I was a little kid. A little more complex, but it kind of looks something like that. And this is actually in the lower levels of a convent. And one of the sisters was taking us around and explaining where certain things were related to Pilate and the interaction of Jesus with him. So we came to that, and she said, these are diagrams for a game called Basilios, which just means the king. And she said, They took prisoners condemned to death, the Roman soldiers, it was their practice, and they threw markers or dice onto the diagram, and since it has many little squares or oblongs of compartments, each one had, and there was a letter of the Roman alphabet. Each one stood for a certain torture practice. So they throw it out and it'd go on one of those squares, and then they would do that specific torture. And then they do it again. They do it until they died, as a rule. And part of the torture, which may come up or may come not, was putting a crown of thorns on them and putting a purple rag on them and put something mocking in their hand as a scepter and kneel down and say, "Hail, King." You see? And they did it. And it made me just feel sick. I thought, my goodness, Jesus didn't even get something special. They just treated him like any murderer or any criminal. And he endured that for love. And it was very, very instructive. So Jesus arose into immortal life. And he showed people the way to immortal life. He was a Nath yogi. You understand? He was a Sanatana Dharma. And he practiced Soham sadhana, because the only sadhana Nath yogis do, real Nath yogis, is Soham sadhana. So why not live the life of Jesus? So I don't care if somebody will say, "Oh, it cured people, didn't cure people." Who cares? The disease we're suffering from is samsara. We need to get cured of it. And so I can't imagine anything less relevant. And you know something interesting? And please, I'm not saying this obliquely about you, but I've been amazed at the number of irreligious people who were deeply interested in the Shroud of Turin and who read books and read books and read books on the Shroud of Turin. They didn't go to church. They didn't do anything. They didn't pray. And they were intent on the Shroud of Turin. As Swami Brahmananda, Sri Ramakrishna's great disciple, used to say, considering the ways of human beings, just look at the fun. Okay, here we go. And this is the last. Should one practice Soham and a bija mantra, or is it more effective to practice just one? Well, the combination of the two has never been in anybody's tradition, so you can always try it. But it just, if it gives you a buzz, doesn't mean anything. I knew a man that was given a bija mantra, and he got it wrong. He didn't hear it right. I was an Indian yogi who taught him. But the Indian yogi somehow didn't say it right, or he didn't hear it right. And so he went home and he started doing it. And he went out of his body. He went out of his body. He lived in an apartment house. He went out of his body. His astral body went up, and it's like his head came out in the room that was above him, and he looked around and saw the people there and so on. And he floated around a bit. Then he went back down in the body. And every time he did it, this would happen. And he was a very brilliant man. In fact, he was a great physicist. He thought, this can't be what it's for. So he went back to the guru and said, look, this happens to me. Why will it happen to me? And the guru said, well, what are you saying? And so he said it, and the guru had never heard such a thing in his life. I said, that isn't what I said. And he told him what to do. And then he did it, and so on. So just getting an effect doesn't mean it's real. There are practices that can give you psychic powers. There are practices that give you healing powers. There are mantras there are the actual mantras. I've got some of the books. Don't write Nath because it's something people should mess with. But how to walk on water, how to levitate, and so on. And it's just Maya. And you say, well, then how come you got the book? I've kept the book to show that in India there's everything. In other words, supreme wisdom and supreme ignorance, just as well, masquerading as yoga and masquerading as virtue. So, but whether you do Soham, whether you do bija mantra, and you can try them both. Because you see, you're in charge of your life, not me. And it's up to you. After all, I fooled 50 years away in useless practice. Why should I deny you the experience of doing the same? Isn't it so? Thank you for your patience. I see I've gone 20 minutes over the time. I wouldn't have done it if I realized, which means I'm not omniscient. Therefore, thank you, and thank you for your patience. And so again, I say, namaste.